intermediate technology and herbology. And big salon.
And salon.
Ashland, Oregon, for a quarter of a century, he has participated in and facilitated emergent ecotopian culture. The author and publisher of Greenward Ho, an ecological approach to sustainable health, culture design courses for more than 15 years in Arizona, California, Oregon, Washington, and South Africa. Tom holds degrees in forestry and botany from and the SUNY College, SUNY College of Forestry. He has taught and administered programs for Laney College in Oakland, California, and DQ University. He now has a private business as an environmental planner. And he's teaching a course in Williams, June 14th through 25th. It's an intensive culture design course. And since I am taking the course with him right now on a weekend course, a series of weekends, I highly recommend him. And I have a means of comparison because I've taken it before. And they were both excellent.
Okay, I wrote it, but I'd never heard it read out loud.
Go Big Orange.
I guess that's why they made me a college administrator sometimes. Actually, I never understood at any point in my life where I was going, but here I am. And this trip that I took to South Africa was definitely a life-changing experience, one of the big ones. And I had no idea that I would ever do such a thing. And that's one of the permaculture principles, is that we don't go where we aren't invited. And I was invited out of the blue to go to South Africa. I never would have thought of it. And part of the theme of this slideshow is trying to understand, what good are we? What can we do that's of any use? Especially in another culture, in another country. And a great deal of the discussion during the time I was on this project in South Africa did have to do with, how do you know ahead of time who's going to really work, who's going to be useful? It's not an easy question. I don't believe you can interview people and know ahead of time they're going to work. You know, they're going to be okay. But we did kind of come to understand that it's the person who would never think of doing such a thing who has a better chance. Because they're going to be, as I was, in utter shock to be in such a situation as this. So basically, this was in the fall of 1994. Nelson Mandela had just been elected that spring, early summer, and things were changing, just beginning, and still are. And South Africa is a very interesting place. In South Africa, there are more paved roads than the entire rest of the continent of Africa. Africa is a first world, third world, and fourth world country, all jumbled up together. And the history of South Africa is so compelling because of amazing things that have happened there. First of all, the oldest human inhabitations and tools are to be found in South Africa on the planet. And that is where you find the Bushmen, who are the almost other species of human. They are so different from us. They're built very, very differently, and they have very, very different bodies. And they may be the oldest people. The Bushmen may be the original people. Coming into South Africa from the north came the cattle-driving tribes, which were taller and of a different sort than the Bushmen, who were brown. So the black or darker people came in about 1,000 years ago. And they established high civilization with ironworking and clay and villages and the great city of Zimbabwe, which when the first white people arrived, couldn't figure out how white people had ever gotten to South Africa to have built a city. In other words, they couldn't imagine how black people could ever do such a thing. But here it is, ancient, massive city, Zimbabwe. And so then come the Afrikaners. And they arrive in the early 1600s. And they pretty much stayed put around Cape Town for a long time. And then they started trekking illegally out into the bush. And eventually it became sort of like a gold rush, sort of like we're all here in California and Oregon right now. But a thing called the Mafakani happened, which was called the Zulu uprisings, although that's not totally the whole game. Really, the Zulu were involved in a lot of social change and warfare that moved out in ripples. And all these Iron Age villages were destroyed by social chaos. It wasn't organized warfare. It wasn't empire building. It was chaos. And the Afrikaners arrived to find the destroyed villages and the dispirited people and said, see, just like it says in our Bible, you are the cursed ones. We are the blessed ones. You will now work for us. And so they took things over. And this was in the early 1800s, mid-1800s, about the same time as California. And then from there, the Afrikaners actually went to America to study the Native American reservation system. And apartheid is based on the Bureau of Indian Affairs. So we, the Americans, invented apartheid, and the South Africans borrowed it from us. And except that South Africa was a little bit more isolated, and they were part of the British Empire, and they had a lot of spice trade, and they brought in workers from the South Pacific, and so you ended up with a very different mix. And this leads to the present very complicated set of languages and situations in South Africa. So I was invited to work on a project called Tloleho, which is a Tswana word, or Setswana word. And this is an old Afrikaner farm that was bought by the son of an industrialist, Paul Cohen. And his dad was a good buddy of Nelson Mandela's, sort of a pocket advisor, an economic pocket advisor. I think his business was chipboards or plywood or something. So Paul knew enough of the industrial class of South Africa to be able to raise money and to be able to get materials. And so he bought a 250 hectare, which is like a 400-acre, 500-acre farm that was no longer farmable, near Rustenburg, which is now Northwest Province, which was then, I'm forgetting, Transvaal. The whole Transvaal, which is high elevation bush country, like 5,000 foot above sea level, has pumped its groundwater down to the point where it's salty. And so the farms are being abandoned. They can no longer grow corn. And so this farm has been taken over because it's a failure commercially by pumped water. And it's being turned into an institution for the education and benefit of the Tswana people. And I can't even say the Tswana. There's this big long word that represents this area, which was one of the homelands. So I'll give you more details as we go through the slideshow, but I wanted to sort of set some of the background here. And I have to say that it was scary. You know, the experience in South Africa was difficult. It was work. Because the taxis, which were Volkswagens with 22 people in them, going at 90 miles per hour, and no public transportation otherwise, and lots of class or group animosity. And so there's, you know, the MKL or something like that, which were the guerrilla forces, had been disbanded and were trying to be integrated into the South African army, and there was a great deal of turmoil over that. So it's, you know, this is something we haven't experienced since the Civil War in America, which is war on our own territory. A revolution, a serious revolution on our own territory that involves everybody. So, you know, this is quite a strange and wild situation. All right, now anybody have the lights? Who's in charge of the lights? Yeah, thanks. Thank you. The promise that was made in order to bring peace was that all the people of South Africa can become African. The white tribe, the yellow tribe, the red tribe, all of the different peoples who have gathered in South Africa have an opportunity to become African. So this is Paul, this is his wife, and this is Dume. Dume is Swana. He's an artist. And he was in the room next to me, and we got along pretty well. So these are the folks. And this is the local ruins of the Iron Age culture. And this is the heavy grazing that is now around this village. The grasslands of South Africa are immensely potent. These are native grasses you're looking at. And this is the thorn bush, which is a number of species of jujube, Chinese dates, okay, native species of jujube. Acacia carew, which is a thorn acacia, a legume, which is invading the grasslands. So the grasslands are in danger in South Africa because of reforestation. The forest is encroaching on the grasslands and is a lower level, if you can measure such a thing, ecological order. And why did the trees not be there before? The elephants knocked them down regularly and ate them up. So with fencing and removing the megafauna and putting cattle out, now the trees are just expanding and taking over. What you see is, geologically, this is very strange. All of this is magnetite iron ore. When I got there with my compass, it was absolutely useless. And my surveying techniques needed adjustment. Everything had to be done with sundials that you put out and triangulated off of with your surveying equipment, because the ground was literally littered with iron. This is all iron. And these walls were covered with plaster. And that plaster, you see the rusting color? See the iron kind of color in this stuff? Sometimes when you kick a rock, it actually rings. It's like really weird. But these were incredible villages. There's some of the plaster. So the iron walls went up, and then there was mud plaster, and then they were painted, and they had these beautiful thatch roofs, and the thatch roofs had multiple colors because of the grasses of South Africa. There's so many different colored thatch grasses that they were able to build these beautiful buildings. And their villages were lovely, and I think the cows were in an outer ring around the buildings on the inside, and each different tribe, the Manetabele had one form of village and the Swana had another, so you could study all this stuff. And here we're taking Dume to see his ancestral village. And this is a theme I'll return to, perhaps. There's a lot to say. It's hard to get third world people to have respect for their ancestors when the ancestors' culture was destroyed. It's hard to get them to say, to live in mud buildings with thatched roofs again. They don't want to do it. They want Cadillacs, TVs, cement block buildings, and they expect Nelson Mandela to personally be delivering these things at the driveway in a couple of days. So they're not highly motivated. So our biggest task, one of our biggest tasks, was to return some pride to the people, or to, to say things that were positive and to demonstrate how we love to do these things. I don't know how they ever found a lentil like this, but look at that beautiful piece of stone. And I don't believe that's hewn. They found it in the cliffs someplace and carried it here for the village. And you can see this is all the walls of the village. It's amazing to visit these sites. So Paul is serious about becoming an African, about accepting, his family, Jewish, have been there for 3-4 generations, and now he's dedicating his life to getting onto the land. And Africa goes through incredible droughts and fires and driving rainstorms and social upheaval, and everybody just shrugs and say, Africa always comes back. And they go on. It seems to go away, and then it comes back. It rains again, the grass grows again, the trees bloom. So there's a perpetual sense of disaster followed by success. So this is the farm as you drive in from the main road, from the paved road. And just after a rainstorm, you can see some water puddled in the driveway. And this is all iron red dirt, sort of a heavy clay. And this is a gravilla, a she oak it's called. I believe it's from Australia. These are citrus trees. These are apricots in here. Another group of trees that are part of the thorn belt here are relatives of poison oak. The sumacs, the rus genus, and they're quite nice, and they're not very toxic. Poison oak and poison sumac in America are perhaps and the lacquer tree in Japan, the black lacquer tree, that's also toxic. This is a farmhouse, and the farmers all felt very insecure, and so they barred heavy metal doors, heavy metal welded screens outside all the windows, stone buildings that can take mortar rounds and stuff, and metal roofs that can't be burnt. So they built fortress-like. And I do need to keep reminding you of where we are, okay? Now what we're doing here is retrofitting these buildings. So these are black wattle shade arbors, and they will eventually have thatch on them. You can see that's a shade arbor over here as well. Black wattle is acacia from Australia, and it's rampant in South Africa. One of the jobs that I took on while I was there was to identify the economic and utilitarian uses of the invasive European and Australian trees, so that we could focus. For example, the stream courses were being filled up with weeping willows and silver poplars, Populus alba and Salix babylonica, and others. And so if we would coppice those and develop basketry trades on the sprouts off the stumps, they wouldn't sexually mature anymore, they wouldn't spread seed, and we could keep them under control while the natives reestablished themselves. So it was that sort of thing of trying to mix ecological mandates with economic opportunities. So now we're moving down the side of the house to the left from where we were. This is a mulberry, white mulberry. Okay? This is a pomegranate. This is a guava. This is a poor dead lemon. This is another citrus. They dug the roots to put in a septic pit of some sort. And this place, here's more arbors built from the wattle to get the grapes up onto. And there's benches in the shade. It gets very hot. This is at such a high elevation. And this is what's strange. What the hell happened with that switch? The lights just came up. What did I say?
This is very strange.
Yes. The tip, the Cape of Good Hope, the tip, or Cape, yeah, that's right. The tip of Africa is San Diego. Everything in North America is in the Indian Ocean, you know, towards Antarctica. So Africa really ends at a very high latitude, a very low latitude, you know, 30. And we're here at 42. So, so think Tijuana, okay, or northern Mexico. This is the latitude we're at. And when I arrived here, I had never traveled to the southern hemisphere before. And I was seriously disturbed when I arrived. I would have to say I was angry. I was really shook up because the sun was rising on the wrong side and going in the wrong direction, and it just didn't make any sense. And I was very, very disoriented. It took me about 2 weeks to get used to it. And I never expected this. I never thought that it would be so disorienting. Aha. Now I remember. Right, we're back in South Africa. Okay, what do you do when the boss does no work at all, and you, the indigenous people, are the ones who do all the work? You sabotage constantly. So the poor Afrikaner farmers had a revolution on their hand for 100 years. And everything that was done badly. Now, and I don't mean to be too racist against the Dutch, because I myself am 50 or 60% Dutch. But the Dutch also have a wonderful habit of not caring if things are done right, as long as there's a good coat of paint on them at the end. All it needs to be is clean and painted, and everything's okay. So this is a hot water plumbing system. This is a wood-fired tower. We'll see another picture of it later. This is the bathroom. And here we have hot water and cold water going into the shower. And this is a piece of PVC pipe that's purposely here instead of iron, so that when the boiler gets too hot, this bursts. It's sort of a simple safety valve. And the reason they sought me out to come to South Africa was to fix things, to make things work. Because in order to get... See, this was a funny thing at the end of the revolution. During the revolution, money was secreted into the country. At the end of the revolution, all money that was going to NGOs, to non-profit corporations, now had to go through the Bank of South Africa. Okay, who are the bureaucrats in the Bank of South Africa? The Afrikaners, not the English. And so the Afrikaners now had a chokehold on all public funds that were going to projects. So what was necessary at Tloleho was to make things look very neat and tidy so the bankers would be impressed and release some funds, which they were holding in their accounts and that were, you know, earmarked for this project, but they wouldn't let go. Now the other thing is that the people who did know what they were doing were mostly white, and were the techies, they called them, the techies, like on Star Trek or something. And the techies lived there. I'm just a visitor. So I come in and I look at how things are rigged, and I go, why is this jury rigged this way? You don't need this motor switch. Now, it is single-phase AC 230 volt. It's not the AC we've got at 110 volts. It's kicker. All right, this is European voltage. And so But my dad was an electrician, I saw no need for this, and it kept breaking down. Every single pump and machine on this whole place had a motor switch on it. The guy must have had a warehouse full of motor switches, and he was selling them to every farmer by the armful load. And I said, well, I'm going to bypass this because it's not working. And they said, well, but he's going to yell at us when you're gone. So the farmer, the person who doesn't know what they're doing technologically is caught between the sabotage of the workers and the sabotage of the techies. And there you are. And you don't have a lot of knowledge in a place like this because it was all kept very monopolized, which is the nature. Apartheid did not just separate the races. It monopolized the industries. One cement cartel, one lumber cartel, one mining cartel, and this led to a great deal of mystification of technology. So the wells are salty, but not so salty that you can't drink them. But you can't pump them for irrigation because they'll get saltier lots faster. So this is a holding tank, and this is a pressure bladder, and this is the main pump, and this is the water line. In this direction it goes to the village. Every Afrikaner farm, every farm in South Africa had its own on-site village, which was the workers' housing. And when the farmers are failing, and the farmers are like stopping farming, this is the only housing there is. So, and from the air, there's a square grid, which the trucks and the white people drive on. And then there's the back trails that go through the bush between one worker compound and another worker compound. And again, we looked at those patterns and looked at developing a bicycle that had thorn-proof tires that would allow easier travel between these small, tiny little villages, and then planting foodscapes along these trails. So there was fruit and food. So we were trying to reconnect the indigenous people in the fastest possible way by using patterns that they had already established. This was the kind of thing we were doing. At the same time, there were very few wild animals left because there were wire snares everywhere, and fires were not fought. Fires were lit on purpose in order to chase whatever's alive out so they could be eaten. The people were starving, and I'll get back to that again. So this is a soak-away pit. It's the gray water system for the kitchen, the main kitchen. And the main house was for the white people, for the staff, myself and 5 architects from Cal Earth in Southern California, who are the dirtbag folks, Cahill, not Cabran, Cahill somebody else, an Iranian, and we'll see more of that. So we're developing a motif though, these arches with bricks. So these are storage cubbies, and this is a hand washing sink to get ready for large numbers of people to run an outdoor college essentially. This is black wattle again, and these are herbs for the kitchen planted outside the kitchen door and around the gray water system. So that's pretty good permaculture. Relative location. Okay, there's your hot water heater, and that's that plumbing we saw before. And basically it's a big chimney with an iron tank inside of it set on rails. And you come in and you light the fire, and they were using a lot of wood and not heating the fire very fast. So this is an example of the high-tech, you know all those big words you heard about me? Well, what I did was take a piece of roofing tin and put it in front of the hole. Greatly improved the operation. Now, one of the first things they had to do was remove all the asbestos from the inside of the building. Because of the mining industry in South Africa and the cheapness of things, everything had asbestos. They were living in houses filled with asbestos. But there's no governmental program for properly disposing of this asbestos. So this was an old leaky water tower. All the asbestos from the house was stuffed into this water tank and sealed over on the top to make a platform, and then a new water tank was put on that platform. That's called appropriate disposal. I mean, it's pretty good. I think that was good thinking. And here are wattle poles being put in to build shade arbor, to use this as mass, because during the night it gets pretty cold. During the night it gets pretty hot. If you can shade and protect a huge piece of mass, you have a cool place to sit during the day. You can sit basically on a bench right up against this big chunk of mass and stay cool. This is the beginning of the outdoor kitchen with ovens and serving areas, and we'll see this again a little later. This is the chicken coop, and we're using wattle fencing here. There were none of the hyena, small fox type predators left. The chickens didn't need to be protected from skunks, raccoons, you know, that sort of thing, the equivalent in South Africa. On the other hand, there were 70 species of poisonous snakes. 70 species of poisonous snakes, including some of the most poisonous in the world. And that was I'm a botanist, as you heard. Every botany book starts with a chapter on snakes, because botanists are killed by snakes more than anybody else, because they're always reaching to pick a pretty flower, you know, and the snake gets them. So here we are. These are recycled metal frames. There's only one factory in South Africa that makes windows and door frames. And that's a friend of Paul's father. So the ones that aren't perfect, we get as surplus. And this is some of the dirt bag architecture that the Cal Earth Institute is famous for. We're building up a lot of mass here for the ovens and for sitting. And you'll see so much mass in these pictures. And this is the original plaster on the outside of the dirt bags, similar to what you do with straw bale. Okay, the final plaster, which we'll see later, is a cement. You can see some of it in the background. There's a little bit of cement plaster, very thin shell of cement on the outside of an adobe initial plaster. No, those are recycled bricks. We will see some adobe bricks. I have an operation slide. We'll return to this, but here's the solar hot water system that I put back together. This is the above ground cistern pond so that you can irrigate by gravity out of it. And here's some cane, similar to our Phragmites. I believe this is some bamboo over here. So, and there, look, there's some native thatch. And we'll see all of those things again. Okay, so now here's a traditional Swana outdoor kitchen. And this is called a potjie pot. This is an iron pot that's basically been made for 1,000 years. It has 3 metal legs, and you do 3 stones and a fire. And at Approvecho Institute, which is a famous stove testing place in Cottage Grove, Oregon, they tested the 3-rock stove. And if you're clever with 3 rocks, you can do just about as good as any high technological wood-burning stove. It's just a matter of skill. So these are efficient cooking devices with ribs around them, and they catch heat. Whoops, they catch heat really well. And this is a simple shade, so you still have light. And we added dirt bags, and this is to get out of the wind, to have that like low pit. And here we're lining the paths with iron ore to keep the bankers happy. Now, this is the Magaliesberg Range. It's quartz conglomerate. It's 2.5 billion years old. This landscape had 7 kilometers of rock layers on top of it. All the rest washed away, and that's why the iron is still here. It was too heavy to be washed away. So that iron is out of 7 kilometers of ground that is now gone, you know, something the size of Everest. And this landscape is there is only one older continental mass on the planet, and that is the Laurentian Shield and the Adirondacks in upstate New York, which is 3.5 billion years old. So this is 2.5 billion years old. Okay, here's the chicken coop. Notice the motif. You know, at one point we had these cubby holes for hand washing. Now it's chickens for egg laying. And while I was there, all the chickens died from Newcastle's disease. In fact, the entire chicken industry of South Africa was suddenly kaput. It's something we don't hear about happening in the United States, but all these chicken factories suddenly dead. Newcastle's disease like an epidemic. And I have raised chickens for years, and I didn't know about Newcastle's disease. I'd never seen it in the United States. And so I thought the chickens were choking on the oversized corn kernels. Now, part of the deal in South Africa is that no grain grinders were allowed. They were illegal, because the government had a monopoly on the corn, which they called mealies, maize I'm talking about, from Mexico originally. It's the major food of the third world South Africans. It's called mealie pap, P-A-P. It's denatured cornmeal. So the corn goes whole to exclusive grinding sheds owned by the government, and the grain, the germ and the oil is taken out of the corn, and the denatured, insufficient nutrition mealie pap is given to the people. And this kept the people weak, tired, unable to rebel, high levels of alcoholism, children would beriberi, tremendous amounts of abuse and anger and violence, all basically nutritionally based. On top of that, no one ever told them about using ashes, hardwood ashes, to improve the nutrition of the corn. Right? They could have taken that mealie pap. You could take that mealie pap, treat it with lime, and end up with a more balanced amino acid diet, and avoid a lot of the problems, the alcoholism, the sugar balance problems, the loss of intelligence, the children, all the problems with the children. So this was purposeful, slow genocide on the part of the government and the farmers. So nobody had a grinder. And now, of course, those rules were kind of gone, right? Because it was the end of apartheid. Well, I had to invent a grinder. So I found a nice flat piece of iron ore and a piece of wattle and took the bottom out of a bucket and started breaking up the corn for the chickens. And this is where my grain landed when I was breaking it. And the women, you'll see later, the women work in their own teams and the men work in their own teams with their own forewoman and foreman. And the women couldn't believe that a man was grinding on a rock. It was like, what? And no, we're never going to do that. That's the old ways. We'll never go back to the old ways again. But I was demonstrating, well, you can if you have to. And nonetheless, the chickens all died. Nice try on my part. Nice little, we're starting to plant different citrus and different guavas, and this is the acacia karoo, and this is the town hall, which we'll see in a moment. So again, prettification. Okay, here's the traditional Swana hut. See the different colors? And there's a blue grass, a blue stem grass, a red stem grass, and a yellow stem grass. And the blue, red, and yellow. And those are the native grasses. These are pit gardens, permaculture style, to grow things down in a pit where the moisture collects better and they're out of the wind. And these are 2 rows of seats where the whole village would gather for our village confabs. And this is where vines are going to be led up onto the arbors. So here you see a little later, these are gourds. And you can see that things are growing better in these pits than elsewhere.
The wood that you use, you call them wattles?
Yeah.
Are they like really weather resistant?
Yeah.
Long-lasting?
Yeah.
They like full of oil?
Yeah. They were used, they're tannins. The wattle was brought into South Africa because of the cattle trade in order to do tanning. So the wattle was brought in for its bark, not for the wood, because the wood's kind of crooked and gnarly, but it's making it here for this motif. Notice we'll see this again. Notice this shade house back here. All right. In a way, due to the farmers being very loose with the corn, because they had guaranteed prices, they would pile the corn up on their flatbed trucks and it would dribble along the side of the road. So at the end of harvest, or during harvest, the rat population would explode, literally. And in order to grow, and as soon as the corn harvest was over, the rats would move away from the roadsides where they were gobbling up all this free corn and literally march like lemmings on the farms and eat everything. And it was yearly, and I saw it. If you were in the main house and you opened a window in the evening, 3 to 6 rats would come through the window airborne like missiles. And you would have to kill them, or you would have nothing to eat in the morning. And it was really a nasty thing, but it was the reality. And I saw armies of rats running across roofs and stuff. It was amazing. And this is an ecology massively out of balance. And so you can note what I'm saying here about the parallels between the apartheid human situation and the ecological situation. And there's a wonderful book which I didn't bring with me because I just moved and I couldn't find it, that talks about how the ecological problems of South Africa are very similar in their origin and their shape to the ecological problems of the United States for the same reasons. It's a very interesting book. I can't, I'm even forgetting the name. And this is the designer recliner, as we say in permaculture. James, the fellow who landed here and told Paul that I was the guy to get, put it up so that he could observe what was going on. And isn't this beautiful, these sweeping lines? And
More about how they form the roof?
Later. Yeah, I have a whole series of shots of the exact technique. It's a different technique than the European technique, quite different. And this is all brushed in the end and smoothed, so it's quite nice. But this is sort of an invented building using the dirt bags and the plastering techniques. These are dirt bags. Nice colors, huh? We experimented with different tints in the cement finish. This is a very thin shell of cement over the adobe, over the dirt bags.
Why did you choose to do that under the roof where you're not going to get rain anyway? It's just like the way the roof.
The aesthetic, yeah. See, in a way, we're trying to reinvent village life and make it groovy.
Right.
And we're trying to do it with materials at hand. And we're trying to make it seem nice. And the other thing is mass. Now, this is a discussion I had in the permaculture course, but let me repeat this. Insulation, like you put in your walls to hold in heat, is overrated in certain climates. Insulation is not what you want. Mass is what you want. And we don't understand that easily in America. We're in that sort of climate. Eastern Oregon is almost, even with its bitter cold, is almost in that sort of climate, where mass is what counts. If you have a thick enough mass wall, it acts over as a seasonal flywheel, and you don't need insulation. So overnight, these benches, which are shaded, get cold because of the cool nights. In the morning, when it's time to have, when it's gotten too hot in the late morning, and it's time to have a confab, what does it feel like to sit on these benches? Very nice. So there's your answer, Shahoma. Now, this was cement is almost an immoral product, ecologically. It's energy embedded, as they say. But in South Africa, there was so much cement available especially for free through Paul's father's buddies and stuff, that we used more cement than I would normally want to use. Now, this is a borrow pit which dirt was dug out of to do the dirt bags, and then the borrow pit was lined with ferro cement to form a rainwater pond. And then these metal roofs and the cisterns have overflow into this pond, and then you can also top it up with the wells. And so we were working towards aquaculture systems, and these benched down. So they were like benched down ponds, which made them a little safer to have children around. You couldn't slip in real easy. And here you can see the effect of shade arbors, and this is a nursery box, rat protection. We'll see more rat protection as we go along. Certainly.
I have a curious question.
Yeah.
Some of these pictures, how long have you been there, and how many people have been working to create all this?
This project was 3 years old when I got there. It had had 2 or 3 changes of crews, you know, basically failed crews, and this was a starting over again. Bill Mollison was here in the early 90s and did a course, and that sort of got the thing going. And I was there for 4 months. And these shots, some of these shots are towards the end of that visit, as I was scurrying around. See the magnetite? In other words, here's what looks like a red rock, and you break it in half, and it's black and crystalline on the inside. And here's that motif again of using the dirt bags. This is, in some ways, this is easier than straw bales, right? As far as shaping and ending up with something that you can really plaster very easily. So it works out quite nicely. These are kudu horns. They're spiral. And we actually ran water through them, and the water, when it came out the bottom, was braided and sparkling. So what you can do with water by putting it through a shape is astounding, and there's lots of books on this about what to do with water, how to improve water. So when we did fill this pond from the well, we put the rainwater directly in, but from the well we would run it through the horns, and we would enliven the water in the pond. And this is rat protection around the garden. An attempt at rat protection would look at all the heavy rocks around the outside. This is screen. There's the kudu horns. See the holes in the bottom? And then there's just put the hose in the top. This is a water scorpion. That's about actual size. And this is its air tube coming up to the surface of the water. And these are pollywogs. Now, you're on a desert. It's been the dry season for a long time. And then while I was there, the rain started. As soon as the rain started, there's toads everywhere. And you go, where did they come from? They came up out of cracks in the ground where they were in little slime balls waiting for the first rain. You know, they would create their own little estivation pocket and hide out there. These are scary looking, aren't they? Wait till you see what else I've got. No. They just look scary. Look at that, pollywogs. Now, I never was able to identify this floating vegetation. A whole bunch of stuff that we have in America is South African. We have South African weeds, like the puncture vine that they're spraying all the ditches for. South African, Xylophyllaceae, Xylophila. These are weaver finch nests, and this is just the first stage. This is very interesting because the males build the nest. And look at the work. It's incredible what they can do. Tool using, no fingers.
No power tools?
No power tools. And note the range of architecture. Like this one's not so good. This one's got a small hole. This one's about perfect. Well, when the females are ready to have a home, it's so funny to watch this. They go inside these things and they kick the shit out of them. They're like wham, 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 wham. And if the thing holds up, they move in. You know, it's like, it's astounding.
I know what the kids are going to do.
Yeah, I think that's it. So they probably would reject these two and take that one, is my guess, you know. But,
And did they take the mate?
and then look what they do.
They call it?
That's Ruth.
Did they take the mate with it, the male that built it?
That's a good question. I didn't ask that one. I should have. This is the Acacia carew again, which is the major tree there. And this is on the shady side of the tree. So these are the ultimate permaculturalists. They've got a nice, safe eco-village in a tree in just the right location, and they've built these incredibly nice structures that are tensile, expansion, whatever architecture, and then they thatch them. So inside these piles are those nice baskets that you saw before. Lovely, huh? Acacia carew in bloom. Pretty. This is a surveying device called an A-frame. You can lay out ponds and ditches using a very simple device. This is a string. This distance are equal. These two distances are equal. And you make a notch. You drive two pegs in the ground and you make a notch where it's the same if you turn it around one way or turn it around the other way. And so you basically have a very simple surveying caliper that you can walk across the land. And these things are taught at permaculture courses, and we learned them from Mexico. I once had the wonderful experience, I'll have to say, of teaching a course at Aprovecho with a lot of, in two languages, Espanol, Spanish, and English. And we had some Mexican people there who were being trained to start a permaculture series in Mexico. And I got out what I considered to be low-tech surveying equipment. My peep shooter and my Brunton, you know, only a few $100s worth of stuff, cheap. And all the Mexicans were very patient and nodded and nice, interesting. And I laid out some stuff, and then they took a bunch of sticks and some string and threw it together and made this A-frame, and their device was more accurate than mine. So there's things to learn. Now this is an interesting straw bale culture. What you do is you pile up straw bales. This used to be a straw bale. And then you fill in between the straw bales with compost. And then you grow in the compost, and the straw bale literally sinks into the ground next to the compost as the worms and the beasties in the compost eat the straw bales. And so you end up with sunken paths and raised beds.
Specifically straw bale stuff.
Yeah, straw bales, not hay, right. And this is these are wheat straw. This is a mustard of some sort. These are beans, and these are rat protected, so they're there. Okay, here you see it at the beginning stage. Okay? Now, again, we had access to certain resources and not to others. And we went around with trucks and gathered up stuff from farmers who would give it to us. And this gave us the materials to build this campus, to build this institute. So this is shade cloth because, I mean, I'm not a horrible photographer, but boy did I have trouble with contrast. The sun, it's Africa. And it's at 30 degrees latitude, you know, I mean, it's like intense. And this was our fall. Okay, this is our tree nursery. We're trying to make it rat-proof. We're trying to do shade cloth so the trees don't fry. There's that gravia again. And inside the shade house, look at this incredible stuff. Isn't this great? This is wire, metal wire, because everything else would be eaten or rot. And it's doors and buildings, and this is all that black wattle again.
What's wrapping the edges? Is that artificial wire or string?
That's wire there, wire. And that just like sewed the shade cloth, heavy-duty shade cloth, onto the frames. So this is filled with shade cloth these are good diagonals, but I like the shape. So here's vegetable starts, here's tree starts, here's trees that have gotten bigger. These are figs in here, figs cuttings. We had the most extensive collection of tree species in South Africa, and the government and university agents were constantly coming by to see what we were doing. So we were introducing techniques that we designed that we hoped were appropriate for Africa. Now this is a rat-proof germination bed. These lips are here so that you can put in a screen overnight, so the rats can't get in and eat everything as immediately as it comes up. And you can see little trees coming up through the straw. And this is the same kind of rat-proof nursery area for vegetable production. And here you have the flats before the screen is put in overnight. One of the things, some of the stuff that we had extra, that we were able to get large quantities of, was hemp bags, because of the spice trade with India. There was such a big Indian and South Pacific population in South Africa, and they ate so much meat that they used tremendous amounts of spices. I mean, it was outrageous. We had tens of thousands of hemp bags stashed in sheds. And we used those for our dirt bag architecture, and we used them for mulch here around a grapefruit tree. Here's some paths. This is the thatch that's left over being used for mulch. Now, this is the men's foreman, and this is the woman's. Oh, this is the woman's foreman. This is Funky, which is spelled F-A-N-K-I, Funky, and this is Kinsey, his wife. Both of them are educated. They're literate, and they're permaculture course graduates. And here they are in their own design of a permaculture garden. In their what looks like pathways are actually pits filled with iron ore. See the iron ore right in here? So that at night, in the morning, when the dew is heavy in the air, it condenses on the iron ore that's in the trenches and irrigates the garden beds. So this is a dew trap, a desert dew trap to catch water.
Iron ore specific because it's available or because it's a good...
It's, well, both. Both. Yeah. It's great for this. It has such a high specific gravity. You know, it's hydroscopic. It attracts water. So this is, and I think this is Kinsey's sister. And you see they have, this is one of the Rus sumacs, I think. No. This is mahogany. Melia, the true mahogany. And, but they do have some fruit and vegetables. Now, this is your classic building that's been somewhat improved by them plastering the outside of the cement blocks. It's a cement block wall with a single metal roof. No insulation whatsoever. It's the worst possible, it's like a horrible building to have, to try to live in South Africa, because it's cold at night and it broils during the day. And one of the things I put myself to was figuring out how to improve these houses. And we'll see more of that. So this is the village grandmother. And that is her throne, so to speak. It's a plastic, notice a very comfortable plastic chair. And she knows everything. She knows who's coming and going, what's happening to so-and-so, and what she does. There's her designer recliner. She's watching, and this is the main entrance. So this, see this three-part leaf? Poison oak. This is the Rus. I knew it was in one of these slides. Tree-sized Rus. This is a downdraft rocket stove developed by Alprovecho Institute, and we built one here at the project, which the local people said, well, interesting, but we'll stick to our 3 rocks. Thank you. And they also were using paraffin, which is kerosene, paraffin stoves, and there was no ventilation in the buildings. The ventilation is very difficult, because if you put the wrong kind of ventilation in, the poisonous snakes and the spiders can get in your house. So these houses were like sealed tight and plastered tight. And you know, I developed what I called a potato chip, because there was all this 2-inch black PVC pipe that was broken, that had been sun scalded. And I developed an industry of cutting these up into potato chip-sized pieces, drilling a series of holes through them, and knocking the plaster out of the corrugated roofing, and sticking these and plastering these potato chips in, which gave ventilation, but prevented the entrance of spiders and poisonous spiders and snakes and scorpions. Everything is different. Wherever you are, you have to develop your techniques for the specific situation. You can't go to a place with ideas about what you're going to do, what's right, what is the perfect intermediate technology, what should everyone have. And I'll return to that a little later. That's Dumais. He's giving me the thumbs up, but he's shy. And this is our wattle collection as we're bringing it in, cutting it off of farms, off of neighboring farms. And this is our materials yard. Here we are building a recycling shed, which will have like metal, glass, and whatever. And we're building the roof first, just as shade, because we won't try to keep the rain out. Shade's so important. The more shade you can get for the people to work under during the hottest part of the day, the better. And here's another kicker for you. What is ozone depletion in the Northern Hemisphere? Maximum percentage? 7%. 7% ozone depletion, and we're worried, right? What is ozone depletion over Australia and South Africa? 40% depletion. So there's been a huge program in Australia to get people to wear hats and sleeves because of the skin cancer epidemic in Australia. The same's true in South Africa, but nobody's telling the people. So a lot of what we had to do is try to convince people to wear hats and long sleeves, but it was hard to get them to do that.
Are there skin people as society?
Sure. Yes. That's ultraviolet. And then we had to have these meetings, and we had to explain to them, well, you see, we industrialists in the Northern Hemisphere, we've had this big party for the last 200 years, and we kind of ate up all the ozone, and we're awfully sorry that it thinned out over you instead of us, but you really should wear hats and sleeves. Uh-huh, they said to us. Right. And we know what you white boys are going to do. You're all going to get in these tin cans, and you're going to leave us behind. You're going to destroy this planet, and you're going to leave us to pick up the pieces, and we're not very happy about this. That was pretty bright. I thought that was good thinking. And here they are. This is the gang. Okay, there's Funky and Quince. Okay. This is very interesting. This is the original farm family. This is Ishmael. I think she's Deborah. And that's Paul in the back there. And they do not like this institute being here. They figure they had like 12 kids or something like that. They figure we worked this farm for the Afrikaner farmer, and just because some other white guy came in and bought this farm, it's the end of apartheid. We should own this farm. What are all you guys doing here? And so these were the major saboteurs. They were the people who stole everything that was not tied down, and that constantly sabotaged everything we tried to do. It was very difficult. And the most important thing, and it was part of the sabotage, was this: make Whitey mad. White people have horrible tempers. We have such little soul. We've put up with so little in our life of difficulties, that when we get into a little bit of difficulty, we start swearing and, jumping up and down and yelling and screaming. Well, these folks know how to make Whitey mad. And they love to see Whitey lose it. Totally lose it. And even myself was driven to some extremes, and I'm not a very violent person. So I learned to do the fish dance, which basically, you could all look around. What it means is you're leaning forward out of control, and your mouth is opening and shutting, but no words are coming out. So it looks like this. Okay, that's the fish dance.
That looks like the boss.
And it was very useful. I used it a couple of occasions. There were other dances which were also useful, which I forget the name of, which was the revolutionary dance, the dance of resistance, which was a stamping dance. And we used that to compact the berms on our ponds. So we'd get everybody in a line doing the dance on the edge of the pond, and then we'd put more dirt on, and then we'd do the dance. So, you know, there was dancing, there was singing. This is the early morning prayers at 7 a.m. Everyone's gathered to pray and to, in spite of the show-offs, and to sing some songs. And this is the other thing, Whitey don't sing. But these folks, when they go to their new African Methodist church in the village, and the village is back here in the bushes and the trees, they start singing like you wouldn't believe. And all the white folks kind of hypnotically start staggering towards the village and sit outside the buildings listening to this incredible harmony. And, you know, it's like awesome, the sounds. And they sing everywhere as they're going, and they have these huge sing fests. It's awesome. Now, most of these men, and you only see a few women here, there's a couple of women there, both of those women are severely battered women. They may be beat every single night. She's not beat, but she is. The men are alcoholics from mealy beer, and the women are nutritionally, and the whole culture of the third world, the oppression, has led to tremendous family violence. And the first thing that the ANC did was send around trained nurses to start to tell the people, look, you don't have to beat each other up anymore. And here's the nutrition for your kids. And here's the birth control. And here's the education. And let's start to build a society. But it was very difficult. There's such entrenchment of anger and difficulty, like I said about these guys, who are now gone, I'm glad to say. So here's a borrow pit on its way to becoming a pond. You can see it has a certain amount of rock in it. And here's the screens which we throw the dirt against to get the rocks out so that we can fill the bags, and the bags will then tamp. Because if you left the rocks in the dirt, the bags would break when you tried to tamp them into place. And look at the wattle stains. Okay, look at that beautiful color. We'll return to that. There's another slide ahead. And this is various colored sands, which didn't come out too well. There's a blue over here from various rivers in the area. So there were, you know, this sand deposit and that sand deposit. And so we had these different colored sands to mix in with our cement to change the color and the tint of our finishes, of our shells. This is a test area. These are different colors and different percentages of cement left out in the weather to see how they would do. So these are dirt bags that have been plastered just for a test pit, just for a test area. Okay, here it is, dirt bag architecture. And these are flying buttresses, which I insisted on. The architects trained by CalEarth, the 5 that were there, 1 stayed in the main house, had to have a hot shower every day, and went into town for pizza and movies every night. And they never really lived on the land. Only James and Paul and I really mixed with the Swana people and didn't want to go to town. And the CalEarth people made major structural engineering mistakes, which I had to fix. And I'm not a trained architect. And it gave me a bad attitude for school-educated architects, that they were unable to see some very simple things, and I'll return to that in a moment. So these are flying buttresses that I'm insisting on to hold up these walls, which have no other real integrity. And as the bags are pounded in place, they have rebar driven down through them, which gives them a little bit more integrity. And this is the very first adobe plastering to fill the cracks. Then there's a second adobe plastering, and then there's which is smooth, and then there's the final shell put on. So here's the building that I was involved in, which almost self-destructed, and we'll go through the sequence right now to see how it was built. You make a compass. This is called a compass. It's a pivot with an arm, and there's the top of the arm, Okay, so that arm goes down to this pivot. And that pivot is what's called a universal joint, like under a truck or under a car. And it allows you to lay out perfectly round walls. And as you build up, you go around and you go around and you just keep going and you put everything in just the right place. This is actually a concrete lintel poured in place, framed and poured in place in the air over these metal frames, which you see are only shimmed because there'll be some settling. This is the adobe works. Now this is the Iranian adobe as opposed to the Southwest adobe. And you'll notice that it's pre-scratched with finger marks like that adobe we saw in the very first slides from the ancient village. This helps the plaster to stick better to the adobe, and it helps the adobe to, the bricks as you lay them up, to stick better. When you build with adobe, you use exactly the same mix for the mortar as you do for the bricks, so that the shrinkage rate is compatible. That's very important. People don't always get that. So these are the sun-cured bricks. These are smaller ones. This is the Iranian model, is a square brick instead of the rectangular ones that we're used to. So there's the square ones. Straw, clay, and water, and sand. Right. Straw, clay, water, and sand. And you get just the right mix. There's all these tests you do. You mix this much straw and that much sand and that much clay, and you know, the soil itself was clayey enough to make a good adobe here. Not everywhere can you make adobe.
It's kind of like a cob, cob.
It's sort of like cob, but it's different because cob's laid wet. This is baked.
Right.
Yeah.
But they didn't try cob in this?
No.
And what about strawberry?
Well, this was a situation where an institute was donating architectural time in order to experiment with their favorite thing, which was dirt bags. And I have to admit, dirt bag walls like these buildings they're making will stop a 120 millimeter howitzer. I don't know that a straw bale wall will. What do you think, Shahoma? Probably not.
How compressed the straw is.
It depends on how suppressed the straw is. Yeah, well, you know, these are stronger walls. And they have mass, and they're not insulation. See, straw bales would not be appropriate in this climate on this desert, where mass walls are.
When you say that, is that because the cold?
Yes, cold to cool. Right. And in the winter, hold the heat from the summer.
Whereas insulation is prevented from.
Where's the mass? Right, it just keeps whatever you've got inside from escaping. So then you need a cooling device and a heater, and so mass works better. So here's the adobe mix as a mortar. There's the pivot, the universal joint, the compass, and these are bags to hold, to stabilize everything so nothing moves. So you get everything exactly right, because you're going to build a dome. And you're going to lay these bricks up in a long, continuous spiral. And you just keep going and going and going. Now, does anybody see what's wrong with this picture? Where's the thrust of this dome? Out.
Yeah.
Is there any support on these walls? No. Okay, very good. But the really good thing is the thorn belt. Look at this ancient landscape. Look at these forests out here, huh? And these are cornfields. These are farms that are carved out of the brush here and there where they sunk a well. And this is the results of a fire that went through just before I got there. Okay, so they finished the dome. I kept saying, do you guys know what you're doing? They said, they just looked at me and said, hey, go back to your botany. And then they finished it, they had a big party, and they went to a game park. This is what, normally when you see a slideshow of South Africa, you see a tour of game parks. This is not your usual slideshow of South Africa. So all the architects are gone. There's no way to get hold of them. I'm in bed sleeping because it's Saturday morning, and here comes the workers. Uncle Tom. Yeah, Uncle Tom. Uncle Tom, Uncle Tom. Om, which means uncle. Om Tom, Om Tom. It's cracking. So I had to get out of bed and hustle. So I've driven huge metal stakes into the ground. Here's a dead man, and this is a screw jack, and I'm holding the building up. I had to put these on every lintel because the whole thing was slowly thrusting. And you can see a thrust in this wall if you look closely. Okay? Well, okay, so then I took over and I said, all right, we're going to put a Band-Aid on this thing. So I invented a huge clamp. This is a strap clamp. Goes all the way around the dome. All right? There's Paul up there. It's thick, you know, it's quarter-inch steel. And lots of, again, lots of cheap steel in South Africa because of all the iron and the minerals in this industry, okay?
Bend it on side?
We heat bent these brackets. We tack welded them onto the ribbon. And then we put these continuous threaded rods so that we could cinch up. And then we went around the outside of the dome with a hammer and hit the thing into the bricks and cinched it up some more. And we kept cinching and cinching and cinching. And it worked. Then I had them build these flying buttresses, and this is the gutter around the outside, and this is the skylight on the top, and this is like an indoor courtyard. And so this whole round building has all these outdoor rooms. I'm a big component of outdoor rooms. I've been talking a lot in the permaculture course about this. So in the morning, you're on one side of the building. In the afternoon, you're on another side of the building. On one side of the building, you have your water cistern, where the sun never shines. In another place, you have your gardens. So you have all these thatched, and you can't quite see it, but there's little pieces of metal sticking out to tie wattle to put a thatch. So here's these outdoor rooms. Okay? And these are seats. There, see, that's where we're going to tie the thatch to. And then we're going to build a short wall outside. So there's like a gate. You enter a gate, there's a round courtyard, and then there's all these thatched porches all the way around it. So you have a central core, which is not very big, with a whole bunch of little outdoor rooms around it, which greatly expand the size of the house. So when you really need to be cool or warm, you go into the central core. Now, a whole series of different experimental buildings like this have been built at Toledo for visiting scholars. So these are the faculty houses. Like I said, the Swana people don't want to live in these things.
Is there a need for rat protection?
Yeah, if you want to have any food in here. Yeah, so metal windows and glass, and it's tight. The thing is tight. I liked the organic feeling, just like straw. I liked the organic feeling of the walls. And I liked, if you'll excuse me, cuddling up to so much mass. Just leaning against these big, heavy walls. Just was nice. I never thought I would become so attached, stick to these things so hard. But see, and then the top skylight is openable. So the whole internal core becomes a chimney, a draft, a solar chimney, which draws cold air in during the night. And during the day, you close the top and hold that cold air inside the building. So that was going to be the air exchange ventilation system. At different, that's, again, same place where the cistern and the vent's going to go.
It's buried under soil, so no critters get.
Right. And there's screening. All this metal screening, what they call expanded metal. Note where the gutter spout is to go into the water tank. Okay, so there's a continuous gutter all around this dome. And also, check out the color, you know. I mean, these are beautiful plasters. This is beautiful plaster work. Really nice. I love it. Now, inside the building, during the day, the sun spot of the skylight moves around the wall because it's a round room. And so you can just glance up and you can see what time it is. So you're living inside a sundial. Fascinating. Really fascinating. Okay, here comes the thatch. First you put up the wattle. Note the flying buttresses that okay, and the outdoor rooms. Okay, these are outdoor rooms and these are motif paintings. This is all we have left of the Swana culture that we could get them to get into was their artwork, and we'll see a little more of it. But all of these are mythical animals. It's a whole series of animals. And I was close enough to Sun City, the famous song "I'm Not Going to Play Sun City." That was big in the 70s or the 80s rather. Well, I went there and what was it? The Temple of Doom was filmed there or something. And there was cave painting artifacts and stuff. It was really remarkable and one of the best botanical gardens I've ever seen. So there's all, I'm saying that because don't forget, it's such a mix in South Africa. There's some of the fanciest resorts in the world are in South Africa, like Sun City. And then right next to them are these shanty towns and these homelands and these rundown farms. And I mean, it's just contrast all the time. Okay, so first you get delivered the grass cut in the field like this. Then you have your tools. This is a big long needle. This is oakum, which is tar-soaked hemp thread. And these are metal tin cans that are cut on, this is called the comb, although it's more like a brush in the way that it's used. These are nails stuck into a board, which is used to clean the thatch of the small stuff. And this is the trash that's going to the composting and mulching operations. But you end up with really nice, clean straw. And then you sew it in bundles onto your wattle frame.
You bundle it before you sew it?
Yes, you see it here. So what they've done here is they've put a little kicker of sewn straw here that's horizontal to this direction, perpendicular to this direction, to give the roof a little flip at the end. You'll remember that little flip on the council house? So they've done this, and this is going to be the depth. So it's not that 3-foot thick stuff like you do in England or Holland. It's an African thatch. By the time you're done with the brush and with everything else, you end up with this smooth thatch. And outside of Johannesburg, where the really fancy white gated, heavy protected private army suburbs are, the rich people have roofs like this. They know, because that's insulation. See, this is all metal here. And there's the ventilation for this whole building right there. And it's very small and it's heavily screened to keep the rats from going in. And here's now the outdoor rooms with the garden beds that can be rat protected. Okay. I have another container. So would you like to take a little break for a little bit here? Somebody can turn on the lights. Okay, this is my pet spider. He was in my room inside. No. It was only about a fourth that size, you know. It was big. It was like 10 inches across. It was a big spider. I never have lived with such a large spider. We got along pretty good because I kept him well fed with crickets. Now this is fascinating. This is the mulberry tree. This is the equivalent of mud dauber wasps in South Africa, and this is on the theme of building your own nest. These mud daubers are, so you can see one with its long stripy legs out here. These mud daubers are pulling a leaf cluster around themselves to go to bed for the night. They are making a temporary bivouac. It's really astounding. I couldn't believe it when I found that. Stinger has been removed. Here's an African scorpion. This is James. James is pretty crazy, and you'll see why in a second here. This is the second most deadly snake on the planet. It's called a boomslang, and it runs through trees, not on the ground. Eats birds and things. Full size. This is its full size. This is a second. No, James is. Like I said, James is crazy. James eventually got it from a spitting cobra and had to be rushed to the hospital. They saved his eyesight, so he was lucky. Here is an attempt to compost the incredible amount of extra wood by putting the thatch over it. But really what we did was create snake habitat. There it is with the thatch on it. We're hoping during the rainy seasons that it'll break down to some extent, but this wasn't my idea. Here we're making paint with the wattle bark. Because remember those stains I showed you? See a couple of them in the back here? We said, ooh, that's kind of cool. Why don't we just do that? So we started painting all the cement with wattle juice, which was really pretty. And this is an American windmill. During, remember I told you about the relationship between South Africa and the United States? Well, for a long time in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, there was an artificially very favorable exchange rate with the United States. A tremendous amount of American technology was shipped to South Africa. And this is a windmill made in Kansas City. And I happen to know the technology. So they said, it goes around and around, but it doesn't pump any water, Tom. I went, okay, we'll have a look. So I put up a hauling frame. This is how to take a pump out of a well by hand, what you're going to see the next few slides. The thing to understand is the windmill causes a rod inside this pipe to go up and down. It's called the sucker rod. And the actual pump is in the bottom of the well, and it pumps the water up out of the pipe. And then there's a side pipe to pump it over to that pond that we saw earlier. Well, of course, as soon as we started working, the cement base that had been poured around the wellhead crumbled under our touch because it had been sabotaged. And so we had to immediately hurry and make a new base so that we could have bolts in it and stuff. And this is where the water comes out when the sucker rod's going up and down. Every time we started to do one simple thing, we would end up inevitably having to fix 8 other things in order to do the one thing. There's quite a bit of movement in a windmill. When that wind's really cooking and those blades are going around, the pipes are slapping back and forth and the sucker rod's going up and down, and it's racket. But it's wind power. This is black locust wood imported from America. I got up there, I thought, whoa, this is black locust. And here's the sucker rod top, and we're holding it with a vice grip so we don't lose it down into the well. And we had to bend things a little bit, but it was malleable. We could fix it. This is the inside here is what's called the pump jack that converts circular motion to up and down motion. It was fine. Everything was fine there. This is called a pipe wrap. This is how you pull pipe. You don't have to put a vise on it. Once that chain tightens up, it grabs that metal pipe, and you can really pull on it. Yes, put your tongue back in your mouth. This is a pipe cutter. You see, we went out and bought new equipment. We got a special grant, and we bought, this is a pipe vise for threading pipe. It's usually bolted down onto a bench. And this is a pipe cutter because none of the threads had been doped. Sabotage. And this is Dume again. Hi, Dume.
Wearing socks.
Yeah, well, it turns out he used to work in the oil fields. So here's what we discovered as we went down. The sucker rod wasn't in the middle of the pipe. And the threads were not doped, so we had to cut the pipes. We had no other way of taking this thing apart. And this is supposed to be around here, see? It's worn off. So the sucker rod was wearing on the side of the pipe. I was beginning to get a diagnosis. Go, Dume, go. Here we are trying to, get the threads to move. No such luck. Yeah, hi, Dume. And here is the pump. Right there is the actual cylinder pump. Look at this bend. See that kink right there? Okay, that's the problem. it's pretty clear to me that the whole pipe train, and this is the whole works pulled out of the well, the whole pipe train was dropped into the well by mistake at some point while the thing was being installed. And so that caused the leathers to wear unevenly on one side and to fail pumping water. So I diagnosed this whole thing and took them to town and got them the right parts, and it turned out the leathers were still available. And last year I was sent an email, check out this EcoCities news page on a website, and there was a story about Tlolejo showing me pictures of things that had been done since I left, and it said, and the windmill is filling the pond. So I was a happy boy.
Now, was that salted water?
Yeah, this is slightly salty water. Too salty to irrigate too much stuff with. Some things broccoli, carrots, you know, a bunch of stuff, vegetables you could irrigate with this. But corn wouldn't work. And corn was the thing. So that's why the farm was abandoned, because they wanted to grow corn. And you can't pump too much or it'll get saltier and saltier. So this is the leathers. This is where the sucker rod fits in, and this is the cylinder. And I'll show you another picture. I thought of submitting this to some magazines. So see how the leather here is completely flat and worn, all right? This is the side that was wearing on the cylinder, and that's why it was failing to pump water. And this is a floating valve, and I usually have to draw on a board to get this across. When the sucker pump goes down, this thing floats up, and water comes into the cylinder. When the sucker rod goes up, this thing seals, and water is pumped. So that's how it works. And this is only one of the seals. There's another one, this one, that's in the leathers itself. This is the brass inside of the pumping cylinder. And this is the other one. So you have to have two one-way valves. One works in one direction, the other works in the other direction in order to be able to pump water. There it is turned over. Very simple device.
But functional just with that simple diagnosis.
Yeah, no rubber. Right. Once we got the leathers replaced and we straightened the pipes out, we put new pipes in. Turned out the brass cylinder was fine. Everything checked out. Looked good. Let's go. So that was great. I did that in my last week. This is the pond that the windmill pump pumps into now. And you can see this is earlier. We haven't done the thatch yet. In my spare time, I also noticed a lot of small ends of the wattle from the arbor making and everything, and the porch making. And I decided to demonstrate a village craft for the soccer games that could be made from the scraps of stuff. So this is, you know, this would be high class in America, right? Because that's hemp. That's a hemp hinge. This, you know, this would be a $120 chair right off the bat. And this, of course, is good old plastic baling from all the straw bales. And I made this as a prototype and left it behind for them so that they could copy it in a ceremony. And it folds up. Pretty good, huh? Handles. A whole bunch of appropriate technology is sold to the third world that doesn't work. These companies get these contracts for so many batch hot water heaters, and they mass produce them and they sell them to these people, and they don't explain anything. I mean, there's scams. There's all kinds of scams in development, in third world development. There's not that much stuff which is real and useful. And you have to come in and redo it. So this is what I found when I got here, was these blown out tanks. You can see the inside 55-gallon drum is bulged. They were pressurizing these things, and they're only supposed to be gravity feed. So they were blowing out the drums. They were blowing them away. And it was a mess, you know, the whole way it was laid out. So one of my assignments was, could you get us some solar hot water? So I did it. So I built two systems. I built a flat plate system, which is coiled poly pipe on a black painted metal sheet with hemp bag insulation underneath it, wired down onto the platform. So all of this, because you're so far, so close to the equator essentially, the solar angle works fine on a flat hot water heater. You don't have to tip it towards the sun. And this is a honest-to-goodness steam valve pressure relief. So this system is under pressure. And it goes into the showers. This is the women's showers and this is the men's showers. So you had I delivered hot showers, which actually I wanted them as much as anybody else. So, and then these are the clothes washing systems. So here I have developed a system where you turn on one handle and the 55-gallon drums that were still intact fill up, and when it overflows into the gutter, you know you have filled the drums. At that point you turn off this handle and you're ready to turn on this handle, and this is a loose pipe that's just swinging, and you can fill up the tubs for doing the laundry. And they did, the women in the village did my laundry for me, which I wasn't used to. But it was the way everybody did it. So I did my own underwear. I wouldn't let them have my underwear. But other than that. So here it is. RuCore was the name of this institution that made funky things that they didn't explain. But they look good, Nice curved batch heater.
Do they need any pressure release?
No, not the way I was doing it with that gravity. That is the pressure. See, they aren't under pressure. They were never supposed to be under pressure. They should have had, no, they couldn't have done it with pressure. You can't do it like that. This is a surveying rod that I built while I was there in my spare time. And it's metric. And I had to search Portland, and at last found in the basement of a surveying store a metric facing for a rod. And metric's tough when you're a surveyor. You're looking through this and you go, inches, no, decimeters, oh yeah, right. So when you're trained in English surveying and you have to go to metric, it's quite a shift because you're looking through such a small target. So I added these red triangles to help me. And this means 1 meter, 75 centimeters. And each of these is a centimeter. So this is a decimeter, this is a centimeter, and you can't see the meter. I also looked over their Massey Ferguson and declared it capable of being rebuilt, and they found somebody that could rebuild it, and they did rebuild it. So they now have a functional tractor. And this, if you were a farmer, you would look at this and you would go, oh my God, what did they do? Because this is welded down, and this is what's called a U-bar. It's not a 3-point hitch. It's a very different kind of thing. And it was really badly fudged. And I had to tell them, well, it's really supposed to be this way. Oh, okay. And I made them some sketches. And this is what they were doing the corn with. 3 Mobard plows. I don't think they could have pulled this with that Massey Ferguson. It's hard for me to imagine. Too small a tractor. But I said, look, all this stuff is bolted onto these shanks. Okay? You can make a keyline plow out of this. Just take these things off and make a shoe on the bottom for doing the keyline type ripping and hold on to it. Oh, okay, they said. Note it's a 3-point hitch system, however. This is a top link, it's called, for 3-point hitches. I'm getting technical on you. This is, by the way, the technical part of the slideshow. We made our own sinks there. And this is a giant vibrator. And some people have made bad jokes about this. But you stick it in the cement and you wiggle all the air bubbles out so that you end up with a good solid pour. Otherwise, the air bubbles can cause it. See, you can still have some air bubbles here. and that's way down here where the thing was unable to wiggle the air bubbles out. One of these cracked, and everyone went, oh gee, it cracked. The next morning, gone. Where did it go? What do you mean? Because they knew how to fix it, and so, oh, it's cracked, it's no good, shh, disappeared. I mean, we couldn't hold on to light bulbs, we couldn't hold on to tools, we couldn't hold on to anything. Gone. Instant thievery. These are bricks. See, that's shininess. That's light reflection. These are bricks made from slag from the steel mills. And we're doing the motifs. This is a roof water pond, and these are animals and snakes and mythical beasts of the Swana people. And these are iron ore facing on a brick core. There you get there's the hands. There's stories behind all this stuff. And these are where plants are going to hang in this pond. This is a ferrocement tank system. This is how you build a ferrocement tank. There's the dirt bag base for it. This is the cage that's been made up by hand of rebar and chicken wire to take the... This was my room, by the way, behind here. And then you get out the frames, and you lock the removable frames onto the wire core. These are steel, bent steel. And here we make them, usually here I've made a couple of different styles. This is an external frame type, and then there's an internal frame type. And we usually use masonite, which we paint with oil in America. But there's a finished tank. And this lid is poured in addition the ground and then flipped over on the top. So it's hand poured in the ground. And this is where my ventilation potato chips went behind this gutter, giving ventilation up towards the top ventilation so that you'd get air flowing under the hot roof. And then I put false ceilings in. Imagine a ceiling that only goes to the outside of these lights. It doesn't go all the way to the wall. Okay, that gives you air circulation above that ceiling. And then if you had in the outside air vents, then hot air would go out and would leave. And the ceiling, which I made out of hemp burlap, would reflect and give you some insulation at night. So it was a very simple solution of open up some ventilation in the eaves, put in these false ceilings, and have an ultimate vent where the air can go, and using all materials that are at hand, all these hemp bags and stuff, and old poly pipe. And that way you end up with a nicer house. So here's the gutters into the tank. Here's the overflow into a pond. Here's the base. Here's the spigot here. Here's the spigot for pulling water out for irrigation, and here's the bottom drain for when you need to clean the tank. They had these soakaways for septic pits for black water, and the soakaways would fill up very fast. Every toilet, every pit on every farm in South Africa was full. There was no functional toilets to be found. And everyone shat in the bushes. And James and I thought that was terribly unsanitary. And we were really worried about it, and so we put quite a bit of effort into building a septic system. And a regular old septic system with a drain field. And this is the main tank with the vents, the observation ports. And this is an example of sabotage. I wrote very carefully exactly what I wanted on the wall, and I got delivered something entirely different. And then I had to fudge to fix it, which was pretty tricky. So it was fudge, fudge, fudge. And but the part of the story I wanted to tell is James and I went out into the bushes where we knew the people were going, and we couldn't find anything. And being stupid Americans, we went to the town meeting because we asked all the white people, what's going on? Are there pigs? what's going on? I mean, why? We found some toilet paper, but we didn't find anything else. Where's it going? Nobody knew. Nobody could tell us. What? Oh. And so we went to the town meeting, and I kind of shuffled my feet and said, we couldn't find any shit. And they said, they just broke up laughing. Dung beetles. The dung beetles were scooping it all up, rolling it up into little balls, and stashing it in the ground in cracks. As far as spreading something out into the topsoil near the surface, pretty good. Not too bad, relatively sanitary. You know, the flies aren't getting to it and spreading diseases. The stuff breaks down fast because it's being composted by the beetle larvae. So, you know, but I went ahead and built this fancy system. And so this is it, you know. You're in Africa. Africa is an amazing place. It's awesome. It's scary sometimes. When it rains, the rain goes sideways instead of down. The winds and stuff, and the fires, and but then there's the sunsets, and there's the evenings, and there's the quiet moments, and there's the times in the middle of the day when you go off into the bush and you sit in a thicket someplace under the jujube trees, and the wild guinea fowl that are still there because nobody can catch them. And they're the size of turkeys. They're not the little guinea fowls that we know. They're huge. And there's ostriches on game farms that chase us around. They're dangerous, those ostriches. So it was a great fun, but I was exhausted. 4 months of this thing, I was toast. And I was glad to come home. Because I never was really comfortable. There's so much going on when you're working in another culture that you don't have the slightest idea about. And to just be useful at all is hard enough. Not only did I do all the things that you saw here, but I also taught a 2-week permaculture course in 7 different languages simultaneously. And mostly those languages were in the breakout groups. You know, when we'd break out into little discussion groups, there'd be this language, that language, that language, that language, that language. And so it was an incredible cultural challenge to try to follow what's going on, and who are all these people, and what are all their different languages, and how do you deal with this situation. And so I was tired. But they said that I did a good job, and I haven't been invited back, though. But the colors at certain times of day, and I love to get up really early in the morning and sleep through the middle of the day when it was really hot. So I thank you for your attendance. I made it through another slideshow.
And what have you heard about the results of your work and the success of the farm?
It's,
running,
yeah.
Teaching is regenerating.
Those people who are in the permaculture course can look in the binders and see the eco-village designs, which includes a school and a bunch of housing clusters, and a lot of progress has been made. And it's on the web. If you look for Thlolego, Thlolego. And I forget, I'd have to look back in my emails to find the website that they sent me to, some eco magazine that's on the web, where they're keeping up with this project. But yeah, I'm glad to hear that it's still happening. And one of the most amazing moments was, I did a 6-year project on Bush Street, my permaculture design on Bush Street. And after I was in Africa, Paul and Stephanie came and visited me in Ashland. And when they walked into my house, it was such a shock. I mean, here were my friends from Africa in Ashland visiting me. And I was able to show them what I had done in my place. And So we did have an exchange of visits, and I haven't kept in touch enough, but it was I have a very warm feeling for what they're trying to do. And I think it's a very awesome thing to try to give back to the Swana people the tools to rebuild a culture and to build a culture that's appropriate to place and that draws on the positive stuff from the old cultures.
Would you spell that again?
Thlolego. Tloleho. It's hard to say. I had to practice. And it means place of learning. So I hope that the clue, which they never believed us, everyone who worked here, all the Swana people who worked here were paid wages. But we kept saying, keep working at this. We're going to give you the keys. This is going to be your institution. We're just here as advisors to help you get going. But we're going to hand this over to you. This is going to be your educational tool for your people, for your tribe. And they just looked at us. They could not even conceive of what we were saying to them. They had no idea of what we were saying. But we just repeated it over and over, and I hope they're still repeating it. And eventually, I think, because there were some very promising young folks in the group that were getting rolling, that were taking the permaculture course, I think they will take it under their own control at some point. And it will go on. And Africa always comes back. All right. Okay?
Thank you.
Wow.
To get out of here too.
Not that much of a hurry, but yeah.
Is there any plans to reintroduce any of the native species to control the rats? I mean, this is really bugging me. Anything? I mean, do they even consider? Or are they a bigger problem than the rats would be?
We'd like to teach them to eat the rats because they eat everything else that was moving.
So,
you know,
rats are rodents. I mean, you eat rabbits.
They're not a traditional food, but they're good eating. Especially they're corn-fed, you know, and vegetable-fed. You know,
exactly.
They should be fine
organically.
Yeah. So we were working on that, trying to get towards that, but it was just such a hard thing for them to deal with. Oh, the rats. Well, that's because of the white people, you know, and I think they did eat some.
Yeah.
But no, otherwise it was really hard to have anything moving on the landscape because it would be caught and it would be eaten. Because the people were so starving.
Right.
And the kids with their bent legs from rickets and, you know, all that old Appalachian stuff that we learned in high school, you know, learned about in high school. So